Yes.
On 3.0, you use agent and editor. For those of us who are trying to write a first novel, where
Yes.
would you suggest we?
It depends on how, let's adapt some of this to you. It really depends on your process and things like this. And I'll go over some other ways I've seen people revise. This stage right here, if you're wanting to follow my format, it depends. Does writing group work for you? That's one question I'd ask myself. Workshopping doesn't work for everyone. It works great for me, but if it doesn't work for you, you then are not going to be giving it to your writing group. But you are going to need some sort of group of alpha readers who are good enough to give you their descriptive responses without going into, oh, you should make your book like this. And those are important people to find. Usually I want my alpha readers to be writers themselves and my beta readers not to be. Because writers I found usually, as long as they can keep them, not cross that line between you should do it the way I want you to, they are much better at identifying things such as, this character feels very static. Whereas beta readers' response to that will be, I'm bored here. And they're like, I'm bored, I think there should be more action. Where they're really wrong, what really is happening is a character is static and there's not a sense of motion in that character. But the beta reader's answer will be, I think you should cut this, or I think there should be more action, or they'll try to fix it but they don't know how to fix it. And they'll usually try to fix it in wrong ways. Good alphas won't do that. Good alphas will be able to judge. And so writing group can be helpful. Other writer friends can be helpful. Doing a trade. You want to get a variety of these, though, because you don't want to just give it to one person and then hear what every person has to say. If you can give it to 4 people and one person says something and the other 3 don't, that tells you something. Like, okay, that's one person's quirk. Every one of us has quirks. There are things we will not like about a book that the majority of people who read it won't notice, won't care about, or will like. And so if you also have 3 or 4 alphas, you can say to them, hey, after you go through and you're collecting all the comments, did any of the rest of you feel like this? Or stuff like that, which is why I like having a writing group.
So do you physically meet with them?
Yes. I can't correspondence for a writing group. I correspond for like my editor and agent. But I also feel for me it's good to have a variety between workshop and agent editor, because agent editor will read the book all the way through, which gives a different perspective. Writing groups are notoriously bad at picking out pacing issues. They will think things are paced way too slowly when they're not, is usually the problem. Because if you're reading a book 1 chapter a week, it's going to feel like a glacial pace to you. And you'll try to compensate, but you'll do a bad job of it. Whereas someone who reads the whole thing through will have a much better sense of pacing, but they'll forget the little continuity problems chapter by chapter that a writing group will tell you. And a writing group will also show you where characters start to veer off. You can go back to look at what the early comments are, and you'll see where they like them, where they don't like the character, and things like that. It can give you just a better overall way of pinpointing problems. But writing groups do have problems with some things like pacing. Another thing of writing groups, I think I told you this early on, is if one person in a writing group notices something, it can become a seed that makes everyone in the writing group notice that same thing and harp on it over and over again, when really it's not an important issue. And so you have to be aware of that if one person says, wow, you describe everything as being orange, why do you do that? Then from then on, every writing group, they can be like, more orange! And until you feel like you are just, your book is terrible because everything is orange, when really no one would notice this. It's just normal, but the writing group, someone highlighting it, makes them all notice it. That happens a lot in writing groups.
I know everybody's different at the time they spend editing, but
right.
From your perspective, how much percentage-wise, especially from us trying to get a product from beginning to ready to submit, what kind of proportions do you have for writing the book and editing?
Writing the book definitely takes the most time. I would say for me, all revisions are about totally half the length of the original writing time. So I would anticipate spending about 6 months on a book that took me a year. It may go a little bit longer. That's not counting proofreading, copy edit. For me, proofreading, copy edit, you're not going to have to worry about proofreading, copy edit until you sell the book. For me, my assistant handles the proofread and copy edit, so I don't have to worry too much about those stages. So yeah, that's what I would say, about 6 months, about half, 1 month for every 2. That's going to be different depending. And we should talk about the fact that this is a process used by someone who does do a lot of outlining and drafting, or a lot of outlining and architecture stuff, plotting and things like this. And my process to doing a 4.0 draft is I will take all these notes and I will look through them all and I will actually organize them by importance. I'll put the most important, widespread, sweeping things, fix Dalinar's character. At the top, I'll put medium-level things, such as mention this thing 3 times in appropriate places to foreshadow this event at the end. That's a medium-level thing. I need to do it, a few times. I need to be able to watch out for it, but it's not like, across the entire book, fundamental changes. And at the end, it'll be chapter stuff. And the chapter stuff, I'll just put in the chapter heading. I'll move all the fundamental stuff over to this document, and then I'll have a chapter by chapter with my writing group of things I actually think should be done. And I'll add anything my editor mentions in just a given chapter to that. So then when I sit down to revise, I will go to the chapter. I will open up the document of fundamental changes next to on the same screen as the one I'm working on, and I'll be watching for places where this fundamental changes need to be made, or the medium level changes where I can make some tweaks for them, and I will read through the chapter. I will then actually go to the document of chapter by chapter little problems, look through all of them again, toss out ones I don't agree with now that I've read the chapter again, and these should be things that you can then just go back and fix, right? Say, oh, the Glock doesn't have an actual safety; it has a trigger safety. What's one that came up lately? And so in this chapter, when you mention the safeties, you need to be watching, make sure that you're using a trigger safety for a Glock instead of a switch safety. And so I go back and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I go back, I search for safety in that chapter. I go and make sure I described it right, and then I cross that thing off my list, delete it, and it's done. If you can make one change and then delete it and it's done, then it goes in the small level things for me. And that's how I approach a draft. And I will get to more stuff on discovery writing in a minute.
I was just wondering, so I know you said you have like a 6-month period between 3.0 and 4.0.
Yes.
Does that mean you don't wait for your whole book to go through your writing group?
No, I just submit larger chunks to the writing group if I'm on a deadline. If I'm not, I can wait. And it depends. Way of Kings, the writing group was doing 20,000 word chunks. Yep. And then for the next year, plus, I've been doing 2,000 word chunks to make up for it. And so we're almost through another book that way, and that one we've been doing 2,000 word chunks on like short stories and things like that. So yeah, you guys can afford to take longer than the 6 month, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll be going through, and my 6 months is up. I've done half the book in revision. I'll actually go do my 4.0. In fact, this happens very frequently, and I'll warn readers. I'll do the 4 and the 5. I'll warn my alpha readers. By the way, from this point on, we're in 5.0 instead of 3.0, which means that these fundamental things have been changed. You're going to notice some shifts. You'll just have to deal with it, and they do. And that happens very frequently. All right. Yes?
What's like your workflow throughout the entire year, for instance? Like, first I work on this book, just writing it, then I'll switch over to revising another book, or how does it?
That's what happens. Just as things...
Between writing and revising, like that's it?
Yeah, bouncing between writing and revising. That's about it. One project at a time. Also planning. That's the 3 stages. Pre-writing, writing, revising. I'm swapping between them at various points.
So like what ratios would you say?
It depends. Whatever I have to work on. I mean, I've said how much time I generally spend revising, but there are years when it's all revisions because I've written several books the year before, and then I spend 8 months doing revisions on those books. There are years where I spend a lot of time writing and don't do as many revisions. It just depends on, you're looking for too much structure. I'm a writer. I don't do this for structure. I don't have a desk, you guys understand. Desks are for people who, add numbers or things. I have a couch and a laptop. If I have to work at a desk, then something is wrong. If I have to know, it's almost even if I have to get up at a certain time, something's wrong in my life. I once spoke to David Drake, and David Drake, this is going to be different from different people, but David Drake, he intentionally bought, he's a science fiction fantasy author, fairly popular one. He bought a big, huge plot of land. I'm thinking something like, amazingly, like 200 acres or something, out in the middle of nowhere. And he went and he moved there with his family, and he does his thing, and he told me, he said, I never take any sort of appointment or any sort of job or anything that requires me to arrive at a certain time. That is my life. If you want to work with me, there is no certain time. It has to be between, on this day, in these certain number of hours. If you can get there, great. If you can't, we'll have a backup plan. Then he says yes. And if it's raining, he rides a motorcycle only. If it's raining, he doesn't leave. He calls him and says, sorry, I'm not coming. And he says that's the life he leads as a writer, to be very free and relaxed. Other writers don't work that way. Eric Flint often talks about how much of a binge writer he is, where he gets, almost all of his writing done in a given year during a couple of 2-month periods. And all the rest of the time, he's just doing all the other stuff that comes with writing, doing appearances, doing revisions, things like that. But he sets aside those 2 months and he says, I'm not going to do anything. There's nothing. You can't, because those 2 months, I'm writing only, and I don't exist in this world. And he won't. He will not, and he schedules that out so that he knows ahead of time, these 2 months, you won't be able to talk to me. You won't be able to call me because I'm working. Writers go take writers' retreats and things like that to do this. It's a weird job. And there are a lot of quirky individuals who get to set their own schedules, and so guess what happens?